Hello everybody. Next speaker is Chhay Lin Lim, who is the CEO of Monflow, and he is going to talk to us about financial freedom. Yes, let's get over to Chhay.
So we can all look at the PowerPoint that I have prepared. The topic of my presentation today is the future of finance is open source. Are you ready for that? So again, my name is Chhay Lin Lim, and the outline of my presentation is as follows. I would like to pose the following problem. The problem is that traditional finance is centralized. It is weaponized, and finance is right now used as a system of control. But what if finance was open and free? I believe that if you can open up finance, if you can build finance on open source protocols, that we will be able to foster human beings, that we can help people flourish in their human lives. While listening to this presentation, I want you to keep the following in mind. I want you to keep in mind that whatever I'm talking about is related also to liberty and related to human flourishing. So for me, open finance is a prerequisite to offer people an opportunity to flourish in their lives. And first, I would like to start with why this is so important for me. Why have I been in this space for more than 12 years? Um, so, in order to understand it, I would like to tell you a little bit of I would like to tell you a bit of our personal stories. Um, I was born in a refugee camp. I was born in a refugee camp on the border of Cambodia and Thailand. My parents they fled the Cambodian war because in 1975 the Khmer Rouge, the Cambodian communists, took over the country. What they said is everyone needs to move to the countryside. So my parents were also forced to move to the countryside. And once they were on the countryside, they had to work in labor camps. It was a let me go back a little bit to make sure that you're following the full story. So in 1975, the Khmer Rouge they took over the country, and what they did, they moved people from the city side all to the countryside, where they're forced to work in labor camps. Like many other Cambodians, my parents also were forced to work in labor camps. But what's really horrific is that from this ideology that everyone should be equal, they forced everyone to wear black. And next to wearing black, they only could wear a scarf around the neck. It is true, people looked the same, but everyone was equally poor. And my parents, they were trying to flee the labor camp, which they eventually were able to do so. So what they did was they moved from Cambodia, walking through the jungle, which took several weeks, all the way to the north, to Thailand, where they were accepted in a Thai refugee camp. The first camp was so awful. The first camp was so awful that whenever there was a flood, whenever there was heavy rainfall, there immediately was a flood. And some people living in those camps were too weak from the war, from the horrific events in Cambodia, that they were not able to lift up their head when they were sleeping. And they were just drowning. Luckily, they opened another camp. It was called Sakai Camp number 2. My parents moved there, and eventually my parents moved from that camp to a third camp called Kawidang. Within a few months, Kawidang grew from population of 0 people to more than 100,000 people. I think at its peak, it had around 160,000 people. So can you imagine a place that grows so fast from zero to a city maybe as big as Tilburg? Tilburg is a city in the Netherlands. I want to tell you a few stories about the camp. That gives you better insights in how I view the world, why I believe in open source, and why I think that finance should also be open source. So even though we were rescued, my parents were rescued from the horrific events in Cambodia, they were also imprisoned in that camp. So to give an example, in the camp, you're not allowed to sell and buy goods in shops. My mom, for example, tried to sell goods in her own shop that she created. You can see it in this picture here. Sometimes a Thai soldier would come by and a Thai soldier would say, "You're not allowed to sell it." So they would take away all belongings. Or what my mom often did, she tried to bribe them and said, "Oh, you know what? Please leave us alone. We are giving you some Thai baht." And then the soldiers would sometimes leave us alone. And my dad, who wanted to help the family financially, sometimes he snuck out of the refugee camp. But he had to do that at nighttime because if the Thai soldiers would find him, would know that he would snuck out, they would either not let him go back in or they would beat him up. And what did he do outside of the camp? Well, he was looking for work. So he was, for example, cutting some trees or doing something other that was very laborious just to earn some Thai baht. With the Thai baht, he would snuck into the camp again and try to support the family. Most of these goods that you see here, most of these goods were actually given by the United Nations. The United Nations helped us by giving us some rice, some oil, some goods to survive on. And my parents tried to save as much as they could so that they can trade it for other goods or sell it for some extra money. Sometimes there were Thai merchants coming to the camp, and the Thai merchants were then trying to sell something to the Cambodian people in the camp. Another thing that I remember very clearly is that one time we were very late fleeing from rebels because from time to time rebels from Cambodia would come in the camp with weapons, with guns. They would knock on people's doors and they would then steal people's money or threaten people for money. One time we were too late fleeing, and I remember that my mom was begging these rebels, saying, "Please don't kill us, don't do us anything." And she was begging so well that the rebel felt so sorry for my mom that he decided to give my mom some Thai baht instead of stealing Thai baht from my mom. Or one time we were very late fleeing and we quickly ran into a canal, and then Thai soldiers came, and then there was a fight between the Thai soldiers and the rebels. I remember the shooting between them, and I remember that I wanted to cry. I was around 4 years old back then. And we waited and waited and waited until the fight was over. But I can still remember the lights from the weapons flying back and forth between the soldiers and the and the rebels. The reason why I tell this story is that this story is also related to liberty, human flourishing, finance. Whenever people are free of they have the freedom of choice, freedom of association, they will always try to direct their life in such a way that they can flourish, like my parents. Here on the right, you see a picture of my brothers and my dad. I still remember this picture very well. We took this picture because our auntie died in the camp, and we wanted to send this picture to a family member who fled to Australia, just to let them know that we were having a proper burial funeral for the auntie. What you hear from the story is a story that is a story of imprisonment, a story where people are not, they don't have the freedom of choice, where finance is heavily controlled. All the money that people had in Cambodia had to be given to the Cambodian communists. My mom had gold, they had silver, and they were trying to hide it because if the communists knew about it, they would take it away from them. And believe that within the digital age, it becomes easier and easier for certain parties, including the governments, to control us financially. And I think that one of the most pressing problems right now in the world is that there is centralized control over finance. Banks and governments decide who can access financial services. Finance is used as a weapon. Financial institutions and governments weaponize finance against individuals and even entire countries. I will give another example of that later on. We have had huge inflation in the past 10 years. Central banks printed enormous amounts of money, causing devaluation of savings. And by causing devaluation of savings, they are actually encouraging people to speculate with the money if they wanted to preserve their wealth. And our current financial system, because it is centralized, it is also very expensive to use. Doing so, we are excluding more than a billion adults. And I'm only talking about adults, right? So according to research by by the World Bank, there are more than 1.4 billion adults. If you would include the kids, how many people are unbanked or underserved in the financial system? A very good friend of mine is Roger Ver. Roger Ver, his nickname is Bitcoin Jesus. He promoted Bitcoin as a way out of centralized finance. He strongly believed that finance should be open. He is called Bitcoin Jesus because he was an evangelical. Everywhere he went, he gave Bitcoin free to everyone. 2014, he decided to give up his citizenship in the United States. He said, I don't want to have anything to do with the United States government. They are waging wars. They are trying to control the world economy with the fiat dollar system, with the petrodollar. He called them terrorists and he decided to leave the country. Then, 10 years later, in 2014, little bit over half year ago, the IRS came after him and they said, you forgot to pay taxes. You forgot to pay us taxes more than 10 years ago. Whereas this guy, Roger Ver, surely did pay his taxes, but in 2014, 15, it was very unclear how much he had to pay. Because back then, Bitcoin was not regulated, at least not to the extent that people knew very well how much taxes they had to pay over it. Roger Ver and his lawyers asked the US government, okay, if you say that I did not pay my taxes, or that I don't pay enough taxes, let me know how much I need to pay and I will immediately pay it. But the US government refused to tell him how much he owes in taxes. And just for that, they say that he could end up in prison with a sentence of up to 109 years. This is a very clear example how finance right now is being weaponized against individuals and corporations, or even entire countries. I know why he is being targeted by the US government. Roger Ver was the one who supported Ross Ulbricht. Maybe you don't know who Ross Ulbricht is, but Ross Ulbricht, he was the founder of the Silk Road, where people could trade in drugs. It was an online marketplace. Roger Ver was also the financier of WikiLeaks. So he funded Julian Assange. He funded several freedom movements in the United States. That, I think, was the real reason why the IRS, why the US government is after him. So, what if we can build a financial system where there's not a single party who can control and who can wage war on us anymore? I think that would lead to a much safer, much freer world for everyone. So what if finance was open, global, accessible to anyone? So that even those so that even those 1.4 billion adults can open an account and start saving, start paying digitally. What if we would have full control over finance again? That when I do a transfer to Richard or do a transfer to Eric, I don't need to pray that the bank will allow the transaction. What if finance was not controlled by a small group of elites and gatekeepers? Well, this is already happening with open source finance. It got huge impetus through Bitcoin in 2009. And the space is only getting bigger and bigger. So Bitcoin was released in 2009 is peer-to-peer, meaning that whenever you do a transaction, a Bitcoin transaction, cryptocurrency transaction, you don't need to depend on an intermediary. I can do a transaction directly from my own wallet to Richard's wallet, and no one can stop it. Bitcoin is a public network, public computer network. Everyone can join this network. You're not forced to join it. You have freedom of choice. If you don't like Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, then you just don't use it. It is also censorship resistant, meaning that every transaction is recorded on a computer. This record is distributed among a large network of computers, maybe more than 100,000 different computers all over the world for Bitcoin, meaning it's very difficult to censor the record again. Because in order to censor it, you need to convince those 100,000 computers about the record that you want to convince them of. It's also permissionless. You don't need to ask for permission if you want to use Bitcoin. Everyone can create his own Bitcoin wallet or a wallet of any other cryptocurrency, like what I showed here, Monero, which is my most favorite cryptocurrency. It is also decentralized, meaning that there's no single point of failure. If one computer gets hacked, it has no effect at all on how the whole network functions. So Satoshi Nakamoto, who is the founder of Bitcoin, he wrote an email saying the following. He said that a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. It would be done in such a way that you don't need to ask permission from them. A lot of people automatically dismiss e-currency as a lost cause because of all the companies that failed since the 1990s. I hope it's obvious it was only the centrally controlled nature of those systems that doomed them. I think this is the first time we're trying a decentralized, non-trust-based system. The beautiful thing about the internet is that it is connecting us. If I want, I can send a text message to Richard and to Eric, and they will receive it within a second. The early cryptographers of the 70s and 80s and 90s, they thought, why should we not allow people to also send value to each other like that? Back then, we already had email. But why should email be treated differently from sending value? Both are just bits and bytes. A lot of companies have tried this. So what Satoshi Nakamoto said, since the 90s, many companies have tried it. They've all failed because the system that they were building was not decentralized enough. There was always a single point of failure. The record keeping was kept at a server. When a server was closed down by a government, then the whole system collapsed. What makes Bitcoin special is that it consists of a network of many, many different computers, always updating each other on the latest records. So the attributes of this open source finance is as follows. If we compare it to traditional money, traditional finance, we can say that there's no control from banks and governments, no control of central entities. Instead, open source finance relies on decentralized networks. It is community based. Everyone can join the Bitcoin network as well. It is permissionless, it is global. If I want, I can send a transaction to India, to Cambodia, to Africa, and the beneficiary can receive it within a second. Traditional finance is restricted. The fees in traditional finance in general is very high. If I want to do a transaction to Cambodia, it costs me at least $50. But open source finance can reduce the transaction cost to less than a cent. It of course depends on what cryptocurrency you use. Bitcoin is more expensive, but there are cryptocurrencies that use different technologies that are much, with require much lower fees. So fees less than a cent is definitely possible. Traditional finance is very opaque. It's not transparent at all. Open source finance, on the other hand, is fully auditable. You can look into the source code. If you want, you can fork it and you can create your own version of that financial system. Traditional finance has a lot of inflation, as we have seen in the past 10, 15, 20 years. The central bank can print unlimited money, whereas most projects within the open source finance, they have a fixed supply. Bitcoin, for example, only has 21 million in supply max. Traditional finance is also very biased. It favors the elites, it favors the institutions. Whereas open source finance, like Bitcoin, is equal. Everyone is treated equally by the network. It does not matter whether you are a king, whether you are a farmer, whether you, it does not matter at all what your social standing in life is. Everyone is treated equally. The network will not work faster for you because you are a president, because you are a king. The network will treat you the same as anyone else. So I want to give an example of open source science and how it could be used to eliminate intermediaries such as banks. One example that I think most people, it's very easy for people to understand, is an exchange service. Um, let's see. Normally, if you want to exchange, let's say euro for USD, we need to have a financial institution that provides liquidity. If I exchange my euro for USD, I could go to a bank and the bank can charge me, let's say, 0.5%, 1%. Western Union can charge maybe 2, 3, 5, 6%. I don't know how much they charge right now, but it can be very expensive. If we are going to eliminate those intermediaries, like in this case, the bank or the Western Union, what we could do is we can provide liquidity ourselves. So then we can create what we call a liquidity pool. So imagine a liquidity pool where people are allowed to put in euros, but let's say it's a crypto euro. So it is on a blockchain. And people can also put in dollars. And because it's a crypto dollar, let's call this a USDC, and let's call this EUR. Let's say when everyone is putting in money there, and your share of this pool now is 1%. So 1% of all the money in the pool is yours, meaning that you have 1% share of the liquidity pool. Every time when people are doing a trade between euros and USD, people are paying fees. Right? So all the fees are collected here. At the end of the day, we have collected 100 euros in fees. But because you supplied 1% of the liquidity pool, you also have a right to 1% of 100% in fees, meaning that you will earn €1 at the end of the day by just providing liquidity. This is so cool because now you are allowing people to exchange value without the need of an intermediary like a bank or a financial service. This is just one of many examples how we can eliminate banks and other, other financial institutions. How we, as a community, can start providing financial services. I want to show you what we are doing at OneFlow now. So, how can you participate in open finance? So, what we do at OneFlow is we have built Web3 bank accounts. It's a very innovative type of bank account that is connected to the banking system, but at the same time connected to open financial systems. Every euro deposited on this bank account automatically becomes a crypto euro on a blockchain. Once it's a crypto euro, you can exchange it for other digital currencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and many others. But you can imagine that in the future, when we add more financial services on open finance, that you can also make use of those financial services without making use of a bank or a financial intermediary. I will now share with you a demonstration of Monflow. I'm going to log in. I need to enter my authenticator code. And I am logged in Monflow. What you see is the bank account that I talked about. This is special bank account, is what we call a Web3 bank account, right? So this Web3 bank account holds digital assets, so cryptocurrencies, and it holds also a crypto euro. Right now, it holds 14.5 crypto euro. I can transfer it. I can transfer the crypto euro to normal banks. So if I want, I can transfer, let's say, €1 to myself. Oh, wait a moment. Maybe it's better if I don't. Maybe it's better if I use this. Okay. I can enter first name, I can enter last name, I can give a reference, and then I can do the transfer. What happens then is that the beneficiary receives normal fiat euro. What I can also do, I can send the crypto euro to normal businesses. What we built next to that is an exchange service. So this exchange service is similar to the Uniswap, to the liquidity pool service I just demonstrated to you. What this exchange service does is the exchange service looks at many different liquidity pools. So here I showed you how liquidity pools works, and Uniswap is one of the services of the liquidity pool. But what we do is looking at 6 different services. And from those services, we are trying to find the best price. So let's say I would like to exchange 10 crypto euro to a coin called Unicoin, but I could also select Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, Aave, and so on and so forth. And if I click on exchange, next to the fees that I see here, it's going to look at the 6 different exchange services and giving me the best price. I can click on it, and right now it's going to look for the service, and eventually you will see that the exchange will succeed. So to wrap up, what I want to say is the following, is that the problem with traditional finance is that it is centralized, weaponized, and it can be used as a system of control. What we need to do to get rid of those financial prison wall is to make finance open. We already see a huge growth in this industry. What Monflow is doing is allowing people to easily put their euro into this open financial space. Once it's in this open financial space, you don't need the banks anymore. So if we have a secret weapon against banks, what we can do, we can go to, if we want to utilize a very strong secret weapon against banks, what we are going to do, we will keep the money inside this open finance. We don't need to send each other value anymore using banks. Instead of sending money to an individual using the IBAN, in the future we will add a button here saying to a wallet. If I click here on to a wallet, I can send it directly to the crypto wallet of Eric or the crypto wallet of Richard. Right? That will be a peer-to-peer transfer. The goal of Monflow is to allow people to easily on-ramp, also allow them to easily off-ramp to traditional finance, but we hope that people stay in open finance and start really working on making banks and other financial institutions unnecessary. This is, in short, what I wanted to present today. I hope that you have enjoyed what I said and that you understand why this is so important for us in our daily lives now.